All right. Welcome, welcome. Happy Friday, everybody. Nice to see you guys. Looking forward to another great day. Good stuff. Well, welcome to Success Principles. Last week, if you guys recall, we were talking about a concept that Napoleon Hill talks about called accurate thinking. Accurate thinking. And, I'm going to be one of the very first to admit that in today's day and age, I don't know if it's just me, but it seems harder and harder to get accurate information, doesn't it? I mean, where do you go for accurate information? I mean, not going to be the news, okay? Most people, it's things like social media and things like that, but even that is questionable. I've gotten into the point where I've had conversations with my wife where it's just so hard to know what to believe anymore that it just makes me want to like tune it all out, move away to a commune and just like start my own little cult or something. You know what I mean? I'm serious though. Like it's extremely difficult to know what's true and what's embellished or fabricated and, what people's agenda really is. It's hard. Well, we talked about this idea of accurate thinking. And I shared the one of my favorite quotes is that most people don't think. And I shared that quote with you by George Bernard Shaw. He said that, yeah, I've been on the island for too long. I know it's starting to get to me. It's creeping in. But George Bernard Shaw said that most people don't think. Only 2% of people think. 3% of people think they think. And 95% of people would rather die than think. And the more that I'm exposed to this information, the more I think that that's really true. And the reason is because most people allow two things to control their thinking or do their thinking for them. Most people allow their environment to control their thinking and their decision making, or they allow their paradigm to control their thinking and do their decision making for them. And I shared a video with you guys last week, and I got the impression from some of the comments in the group chat that video went right over a few people's heads. But essentially, the gist of it or the idea is that we've got to be careful that our paradigm doesn't control our thinking, because we can get to the point where, like Dr. Joe said in the video, that the body knows better than the mind, where you become so accustomed to thinking a certain thought or feeling a certain emotion that it just does it automatically. Your body, like I said last week, a lot of times people struggle with this one, but it's true that stress is a habit. That worry is a habit. That rushing through your day is a habit. The feeling of overwhelm is a habit too. Fear is a habit. Sometimes like, do you guys ever know, any of you guys know anybody who almost seems like they're addicted to the drama? Yeah, you guys can think of a couple people in your life like that. Right. Well, what's really interesting is like these people, they really almost on a chemical level, their body is so accustomed to feeling that like chaos or that anxiety or that stress or that drama, that if it's calm or things are going well, they will unconsciously create a situation in their life where they experience drama. Melissa, did you have something you wanted to share there?
Yeah, I just watched a short post from Mel Robbins this morning, and it
Okay.
was interesting because she had some type of a therapist on there, and she was saying that a lot of people at the end of the day to like unwind from their day, they'll sit and watch like Law and Order.
Right.
And she said, if you're going to sit and watch 3 hours of Law and Order, you have to ask yourself like, why is that calming for you? Why do you find that soothing for a bedtime routine? And she said, because a lot of these people find comfort in the chaos.
In the
And
chaos.
so that is comfort and soothing for them to watch a show about like murder and, you know, death and like all these like very dramatic kind of things in life. And they find comfort and soothing from it. So I found that very interesting.
100%. And here's the thing, it's unconscious. They're
Yeah.
not even aware that that's what they're doing, but what they're doing is they're watching a show, having a thought that's creating an emotion. That emotion is creating a chemical response within the
Yeah.
body. And your body starts to almost kind of crave that to a certain extent, where it wants to feel more of that because it's familiar.
Yeah. And that so many people find comfort in that, in those feelings created by shows like that,
Right.
like
Yeah.
to calm down for bedtime.
Right. Fascinating, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're not careful, like Dr. Joe was saying, the body knows better than the mind, and it starts to just generate that emotion automatically. It overrides our conscious thinking mind. Now, what's really interesting is I experienced this firsthand, and I've shared a little bit of this with Janelle in the last while too, but I was so accustomed to working like 12, 14, sometimes 15 hours a day, that when we moved to the island and I changed jobs, I does not demand the same number of hours. But there was a part of me that I almost felt like, well, if I'm not working like 15 hours, like something's wrong. And I started to feel uncomfortable with the fact that now I'm just working, 8 hours. And that's like, I would get into situations where I would create work or stress for myself that was probably unnecessary because I was accustomed to feeling that stress and that worry and that rush. So worry is a habit. That stress is a habit. The drama is a habit. But luckily, we can train ourselves to experience gratitude. Gratitude is a habit, isn't it? 100% it is. So is peace of mind. So is confidence. So is faith. All of those are habits too, but they must be trained patiently daily. Trained patiently daily. That's why I always say, like, look, watch your thoughts, because your thoughts create an emotion. Your emotion, if it persists for a couple of hours or more, like it will create a mood, won't it? Some people call it a funk, something like that. But a funk or a mood that lasts for more than a few weeks or more, that's not just a mood anymore. That's like an ingrained personality. That becomes sort of something that's just hardwired now. So watch your thoughts. And that's why when we talk about things like the importance of training our brain to feel feelings of gratitude, feelings of faith, feelings of calmness and peace of mind, that's what we're doing, is we're intentionally retraining our mind, and specifically our subconscious mind, to experience and feel those emotions. My mentor, John Assaraf, he says, train the brain or remain the same. Train the brain or remain the same. Which actually kind of leads me perfectly into the topic of today's conversation, which is what Napoleon Hill calls cosmic habit force. Cosmic habit force. Napoleon Hill says that this is one of the most important, if not the most important, principle of all of the success principles. And the reason why he says that is because this one cosmic habit force is what kind of binds all of the other principles together. Okay. And he says that in order to understand the cosmic habit force, you need to remember or keep in mind a couple of things, two things specifically. One is that nature has provided us the ability to take and command control of our own mind. And we are the only creature on the face of the earth that has the ability to do that. Okay. Nature has given us that ability. And two, the second thing that we need to keep in mind or remember is the fact that we can direct and control our mind to whatever ends we please, or to whatever ends we choose. We have that choice. You have that right. I mean, it is your mind after all, isn't it? You have a right to control it, don't you? For sure. Now, Napoleon Hill here he says, this is from the book Success Habits, okay? But he says that everything, with the lone exception of man, has its actions and reactions fixed in a definite pattern through what we call instinct. All other animals, all other creatures on the planet are controlled by instinct. Okay? Men and women, we have the ability to choose. Okay? Man, this is old English, so forgive him, but he says, man is the only one who comes into life with no fixed pattern and with the ability to establish and carry out his own pattern by adapting himself to the great law of cosmic habit force. Okay, stick with me here. He says, I might say to you that you are who you are and what you are today as the result of habits that you've been accumulating back through the past. I think that's fair to say. Would you guys agree? Yeah. He says, probably the vast majority of those habits were fixed upon you, not necessarily by design, but by the circumstances and your environment as the result of the influences that you have come into contact with. That was one of the conversations that came up the other day after our call, is that your conditioning, your programming, and to a large extent, a majority of your habits, they're not your fault. They were programmed there. They were put there by somebody else. But that doesn't mean that it's not your responsibility now as an adult to either fix, adjust, address for yourself and for the benefit of your kids, so that you're not passing on those same programming or those same habits. But he says, you have the right to control your mind and to make your mind do whatever you wish it to be, whatever you wish to be. You probably have never taken full possession of your entire mind. You've probably never recognized the fact that there are great rewards waiting for you if you do this, and great penalties awaiting if you do not. And I just think that that's so true, in the sense that, they often say that a person doesn't choose their future. A person decides their habits, and their habits decide their future, doesn't it? A person doesn't choose their future. They decide their habits, and their habits decide their future. Now, this works just as true for the positive as it does for the negative, doesn't it? 100%. I always say that, don't you think that it's odd that bad habits are easy to form and hard to break, and good habits are hard to form and easy to break? Like, that's just not fair. The truth is, I said this before too, and I think this originally comes from Earl Nightingale, but Earl Nightingale talks about how if you're not consciously creating good habits, chances are you're unconsciously creating bad habits. And you guys have probably seen memes that are circulating on Instagram or on social media that speak to the fact that, life isn't about finding yourself. It's about creating yourself. And how do you do that? You do that through the use of applying the principle and the law of cosmic habit force. Like, you guys, maybe to put this another way, your habits are literally the building blocks to creating yourself and your future. They're the building blocks, the small, tiny little building blocks that create you and your future. And you think, well, what kind of habits? Well, I think that it probably depends to a large extent on your goals, right? But I would think that there would be some habits that would be relevant for everybody. And after all, we are human. We have that in common. So when we talk about things like quality sleep, we talk about the habit of exercise. We talk about the habit of eating whole foods and nutrition. We talk about the habit of hydrating. We talk about the habit of gratitude, affirmations, meditations. If you're in if your goal is to become more calm, more focused, more present, and have more peace of mind, or become more happy, well, I would hope that you are working on establishing a few habits that lend itself towards that. And it could be journaling, it could be silence and solitude, it could be meditation. But those are the habits that lead to that outcome. In the same way, when it comes to health or fitness, right? If you have a goal to be in great shape or to be healthy and fit in now or ever, you would be looking at the small building blocks, which are the habits that contribute to that. Exercise. Yeah, there you go. Brett's on the freaking treadmill right now. Good stuff, my man. I love it. But here's the thing, the important takeaway here is that I firmly believe that if I just focus my energy and my attention on the small little things, and I do those things consistently, the big things take care of themselves. If you're in the habit of trying to grow a business, or you're trying to earn more money, that's your goal. Well, I hope that you're in the habit of doing a few things like, that contacting habit, participating in things like reach outs and connecting with other human beings. I know oftentimes, and I've been guilty of this too, being guilty of doing what I call post and pray, where you put a post up on social media and you just pray so it resonates with somebody, or that they reach out to you, or, they contact you or call you. My mentor once asked me, well, how many people have you called or reached out to today or this week? Oh, shit. But that's a habit too. I often say that good habits make time your best friend, and bad habits make time your worst enemy. The reason I say that is because, I'll draw this out real quick here. I'll say that again. Good habits make time your best friend, and bad habits make time your worst enemy. And the reason I say that is because sometimes, when you start a new habit, at first, and in the short term, it doesn't always appear as though anything's happening. And if any of you have been doing your affirmations and doing them for a little while, and you're wondering, well, is it actually doing anything? What happens is, at first, the changes are slow and the progress is small. And then after a while, it skyrockets. Same is true for bad habits. At first, you don't notice it and you can get away with it for a while. Over time, given enough time, it's off the charts. And if you think about it, like, let's say this is our good habits, okay? And these are our bad. Well, a good habit, like when you're 20 years old, the difference between somebody who exercises 3 to 4 times a week when they're 20 and somebody who doesn't exercise at all when they're 20 probably isn't going to be real noticeable. Would you guys agree with that? For sure. But by the time you get to be 30, well, it becomes a little bit more evident. 40, well, it's probably pretty clear like who exercises and who doesn't. By the time you guys are in your 50s, 60s, or 70s, the difference between somebody who exercises 3 or 4 times a week regularly in their 70s and then somebody who doesn't exercise at all in their 70s is very evident, isn't it? It's extremely noticeable, okay? But this goes for other things too, like investing. In fact, some of you guys have been in the Master Your Money Mindset workshop that I did a little while ago. And we talked about the importance of something called compound interest. And if you're in the habit of putting away a small amount of money on a monthly basis, it's like $100 a month. If you start doing that when you're 18 years old, and you continue to do that over and over and over again, at first, it doesn't look like much. But you know what's really interesting is that growth chart looks almost exactly like this. If you look up compound interest on the internet, that growth chart will look exactly like this. It's not doing much, it's not doing much, it's not doing much. And all of a sudden, it reaches a point where that growth isn't just incremental anymore. That growth is exponential. Okay. But think about it too, like, we talked about the contacting habit of reaching out to people in your network who might possibly be interested in your product or your service or your business, or even just extending your network to include more people who are like-minded, motivated, and inspired. If you made the habit of just reaching out to one stranger or one person on social media, one person a week over the course of a year, that's 52 new contacts. Repeat that for a few years, and it's not just that person as a contact, it's their entire network. Again, that's that exponential result. You could look at the same thing as it relates to studying. You know, I've shared with you guys the importance of studying and making that a part of your daily learning, reading, watching, and listening to things that relate to this information. And at first, like, it might not seem like a big thing. You know what's really interesting though is I've had two conversations in the last month or so. I've had two conversations with people from my past. These are people that I haven't had a lot to do with in the last, like, maybe 3 or 4 years. Okay. But I've reconnected with them lately. And at the time, like 3, 4 years ago, it's like, we were pretty good chums. You know, we had lots in common, we had similar interests, conversation flowed, we got along pretty well and stuff like that. Okay. When I met with these two people just in the last month, like, I'm not saying this to be rude, but like, I was bored out of my fucking mind. Okay. I swear to God, like, I'm not saying that to try to like be rude or anything like that. But what I mean by that is like the growth that I've endured and the things that I've learned and grown and gone through and experienced, the things that I'm thinking about now and the things that I'm interested in now, compared to where this person is and still thinking about the same shit, still talking about the same problems, still doing the same things. And it's like, oh man, I've been there, done that. Like, you're still there, huh? It was a very eye-opening experience for me. Because you guys and us, we've been reading, we've been learning, we've been studying, we've been challenging ourselves, and we've been growing. And it might not always feel like it when you're in it. You might not always recognize the growth while you're doing it. But then you get around somebody from your past, or you get around somebody that thinks a certain way, and you start to realize, actually, you know what? I've grown a lot since then. And it comes back to making that a part of your daily habits, making that a part of your daily routine. It's about that repetition. Somebody shared a comment with me the other day. They said that the difference between successful people and unsuccessful people is that successful people are in the habit of doing consistently what unsuccessful people only do occasionally. And I thought, oh, wow, isn't that true? You could apply that to every single discipline, can't you? Health, wealth, relationships, fitness, the works. Successful people are in the habit of doing consistently what unsuccessful people only do occasionally. Our habits really are the building blocks. And, you know, Jamie mentioned this and brought this up on a call the other day, that it's about that consistency. The magic word, isn't it? But the truth is that in order to do that, you need to be a leader. In order to do that, you need to take the initiative. In order to do that, you need to decide what it is that you want and then go out there and get it. You have to make it happen. One of my favorite quotes by there's a mentor of mine named Dave Ramsey. Are you guys familiar with Dave Ramsey? He's a bit of a financial guru. Super interesting guy. His principles are what afforded my wife and I the ability to save enough money to go backpacking through Europe for 6 months before we got married. And it was on a shoestring budget, but super knowledgeable, extremely smart guy, Dave Ramsey. And one thing that he says is that God provides, but he doesn't put the worm in the nest. God provides, but he doesn't put the worm in the nest. You got to take the ownership and the initiative to get up, get out there and make it happen. And in order to do that, you got to be a leader. And the reason is because people don't become successful by playing the follow the follower. So let me ask you guys, when I say leadership, when I talk about being a leader, what does leadership mean to you guys? What comes to mind for you when I say leadership? Melissa?
Supporting the people around me.
Okay, supporting the people around you. Okay, right on. I like that.
Yeah.
How so?
I think just with like encouragement and positive energy, positive words, and trying just to encourage the people around me to do better. Because I truly think that shows leadership. I think that if your ultimate goal is to help other people around you become better, then you are who you surround yourself with, right? So if the people around me are always striving to be better, then I in relation to that just become better.
Right. So
Yeah.
you're kind of talking about like the rising tide lifts all ships sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. I like that. Cool. What else? What else comes to mind when I say the word leadership? What do you guys think of?
Being approachable,
Okay, being approachable.
listening,
Okay, right on.
being non-judgmental.
Non-judgmental. Cool.
Mhm.
I like it. Right on.
And I think also having being knowledgeable in your certain area or field.
Cool. Knowledgeable, having some sort of either expertise or wisdom.
Yeah.
Sure. So you guys were kind of picking up where I was going with this, and my next question was going to be, what characteristics or what qualities do you guys admire in a leader? And you said a good listener. You said knowledgeable, non-judgmental. What are some other ones? What are some other characteristics or qualities or traits that you guys admire in leaders that you know, either personally or fictionally?
I think somebody, you go ahead, Janelle.
Go ahead. Oh, I was gonna say making firm decisions.
Okay, making firm decisions, right? For sure.
And I think having somebody who's not scared to ask you the tough questions, who has a way of asking without being offensive.
Okay. So somebody who's able to kind of like have those difficult conversations, but do so in a gentle way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. I like that. That's a real skill, isn't it? Not everybody possesses that.
No, that I think that's what separates leaders from, everyday regular people, I think, is having a lot of those qualities that like are almost scary when you first try to do them, but over time you realize that you're actually through asking the tough questions and maybe pointing things out to people that are maybe areas that they need to grow or improve or change. You realize that you are helping them, even though they may not take it the right way at first.
So have you ever made an attempt to lead somebody or to help somebody and it was met in a way or in a manner was responded to was poor or negative?
I mean, I feel like I deal with that a lot in health coaching because people don't want to hear the truth when it comes to like what they're eating or what they're not doing as far as movement. Or I mean, even yeah, I did actually. I did have an experience. An older woman, she was like in her late 50s, and she's pre-diabetic, diabetic. It took us 6 months to lower her A1C and to lower her blood sugar or her fasting blood glucose. But those were like 1 month goals with me. But it took us 6 months to achieve these goals, which I had no doubt was going to be the case. And but she wasn't losing weight. There was no weight loss. There was still a lot of issues. And we started to kind of dig a little bit deeper. And some stuff about her dad who passed away a year ago came up. And I knew there was a lot of like probably like a lot of things going on with the death of her father. And she kind of like talked about things that she wishes she could have said to her dad and didn't, or conversations she could have had with her dad that she didn't. And so I suggested, like, why don't you write a letter to your dad? I said, write a letter to your dad and, you know, start to do these things and say these things. And so when we connected 2 weeks later, I said, you know, like, how did the letter writing go? And she said, you know what, Melissa, I tried and it was so emotional. Like, I can't do it. I think that once I start losing the weight, I feel like I'll be able to start that process. And I said, well, maybe when you start the process, you'll start losing the weight. And that was met with a lot of resistance and hesitancy. And she didn't really like that. But I believe that that was probably her truth.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. So definite pushback.
Yeah. Well, I think by the sounds of it, it sounds like you were on the right track and handled that really well. I wasn't there for that conversation, but I probably would have given the exact same advice. And the fact that she's, you know, this is in my experience, the fact that somebody comes up against that much resistance to something usually tells me that there's something there, and that it's even more reason why we should be doing something like that. And one of my favorite quotes, a line that's always resonated with me, is that the cave that you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek the most. And what that means for me is that the thing that I least want to do is probably exactly what I need to be doing in order to help me achieve that next goal or that next level or that, you know, next result. And it's the things that I'm avoiding or the things that I have the most resistance about, that's actually the path. There's an author that I enjoy. His name is Ryan Holiday. Ryan Holiday is a Stoic philosopher. What he's done is he's gone back and retranslated a lot of the ancient Stoic philosophy into more modern day teachings. And he's got a number of different books. Ego is the Enemy. There's a few that don't come to mind, but the one that jumps to mind is that the obstacle is the way. The obstacle is the way. And it just goes to show exactly what you're talking about there. It's like where there's resistance, that's where your work lies. You know? But yeah, absolutely. You know, we're talking about, okay, we're talking about what does leadership mean? And what does that mean to you? Well, for me, things that come to mind are, you know, things that, like Melissa said, like being able to motivate and inspire others, about creating change and creating progress. Like Janelle said, it's about making those hard decisions and sticking to them, right? And what are some of the like qualities or the traits that I admire in leaders? Well, it's some of the very things that you guys admire. It's confidence, wisdom, courage, you know, being calm, control. Nobody feels very comfortable around somebody who's unpredictable, who lashes out, who loses their shit all the time, do they? That doesn't speak to leadership, in my opinion. What else? Well, I think about things like action-oriented, charismatic, well-spoken. And then I started to think, well, what are some things that I don't think of? And this was interesting. Would you expect a leader to know everything? No? What about this? Do you guys expect leaders to get it right 100% of the time? So for you, in your guys' mind, a good leader can still make mistakes? Interesting. Maybe as long as it's how they handle those mistakes. Maybe a good leader would also require some level of being humble. Would you guys agree? You know, and there's kind of a balance between being confident and being humble there, isn't it? Yeah, for sure. You know, I think that a lot of times that we have those expectations and those allowances for leaders, but we're afraid to kind of step into that and be a leader because we don't want to be wrong, or we think that we don't have enough knowledge. So actually, we don't expect other leaders to know it all or to be right 100% of the time, but we expect that of ourselves sometimes, don't we? Sometimes. You know, the truth is that we all have the potential to be leaders. Each and every single one of us. But the truth is that the first person that you have to lead is right here, staring back at you in the mirror. The first person you have to lead is yourself. And if you can't lead yourself, how the hell are you going to expect to lead anybody else? But here, I'm going to show you guys something. I'm going to draw this out too. There's such a thing as a circle of influence. Circle of influence. Is anybody here familiar with the circles of influence? No? Okay. See if I can get this. I practiced this a couple of times. See if I can get this. It's harder than it looks. So far, so good. So far, so good. All right, pretty close to perfect. All right, the circle of influence is the people that we have the ability to influence, okay? And it starts right here in the very center. We have the self. Now here, get this, you and I, we had a conversation at the very start of Success Principles, and we were talking about things like discipline. And one of the quotes that came up was by Plato. And Plato says, the first and best victory is to conquer oneself, right? The first and best victory is to conquer oneself. Now, conquer, that's a pretty strong word. But the truth is that in a lot of cases, and I don't know if you guys can relate to this, there's like an internal battle that's going on inside, isn't there? Sometimes, yeah. Between good and evil, right and wrong, things you know you should do versus things that, you know, you do. But the self is the first place that you have the circle of influence. Then, as you extend out, okay, you begin to be able to influence people like friends and families. Oops. Friends and family. And if you think about it, like, I mean, you're around your kids and your family, your spouse, your siblings, maybe to a lesser extent, parents and things like that. But to a certain extent, you'll have some form of influence over friends and family. Okay. And if you get good at that, or if you're in a position where you're able to, your sphere of influence could also extend itself to involve coworkers, okay, or just like community. So if you're like a coach or a volunteer, or you have some sort of like a position on a, you know, parents association or something like that, okay, and then it extends further to include what you could call, region. And you look around at people in the community and people who are known and have influence citywide, provincially, okay, maybe in their region, maybe even in the country, okay? And then lastly, there is the world. There's the world. And sometimes it's easy to forget that the people who have the influence for the greater whole or the larger population, the world, they first had to go through all of these different levels and all of these different steps to help them get there. If they're not able to influence, okay, and lead their family or their community, how the hell are they going to be expected to lead on the world stage? It's not likely to happen, is it? Probably not. And sometimes I inevitably hear people when I have conversations about leadership or things like that, there's always somebody that's like, well, but I don't want to be a leader. Anybody, just out of curiosity and no judgment, anybody here have that thought? Well, I don't want to be a leader. No? Okay, cool. And that's good because, the truth is that we're all leaders, whether we realize it or not. We're all leading by example. We're either an example of what to do or an example of what not to do, right? We're all leading by example. Okay. Now, if there are people who feel like, well, I don't want to be a leader or I'm not ready to be a leader, sometimes I think that, well, that might be a perfect reason why you should be a leader. You might actually be the perfect candidate. And I'll tell you, I will admit first and foremost that there's parts of me that I feel like I did not choose what I do, this career path or this direction. I feel like this chose me. I do not like the spotlight. I do not like putting myself out there. I do not like necessarily being an authority. And if we've ever had a one-on-one coaching, it's like I'm not an authoritative leader. There's a difference between a boss and a leader, though, isn't there? And I've worked with lots of bosses and lots of managers. Bosses and managers, you know how you tell the difference? Here, I'll tell you how you tell the difference. A boss and a manager, they're really good at telling people what they need to do. They're really good at giving orders. A leader, on the other hand, is like what Melissa was saying. A leader helps empower them, but also yourself. Those are the best leaders, the people that empower the people around them. But you also, in order to do that, you need to be able to empower yourself too. Now, if there's a part of you that's saying, well, I don't want to be a leader, or I'm not a leader yet, or anything like that, I really do think that, well, maybe you're the perfect person to be a leader. And the reason I say that is because I remember very distinctly, I was down in the States with my wife. My wife's American. We were down in Spokane, Washington. And if any of you guys have ever been to Spokane, it's a cool little city. It actually looks very similar to Saskatoon. Like it's on the river. There's some beautiful parts to it. And we went out for drinks that one night and we found ourselves in this bar, this restaurant. And Spokane, Washington is like a military city. There's a big military presence there. There's probably a base or something nearby. And while we were having drinks that night, we overheard a conversation. There's a bunch of guys at the table behind us. And they were having a big, a big get together because they were getting shipped off overseas to go into battle. Okay, this is like early 2000s and 2012 maybe. And I remember thinking at the time, like these guys were talking about how they couldn't wait to see active battle, how they couldn't wait to take these big guns. And I just thought, man, I'm no expert here, but to me, that just tells me that these are probably the last people that should be put into active duty. The people who, like, the reason I say that is because well-adjusted, rational, like conscientious people don't want to see battle, don't want to kill other people. Now, how does this relate to what we're talking about here? Well, I think that when it comes to leaders, the people who want to be in control, the people who want to be leaders, the people who want that kind of power, oftentimes end up being the very people who abuse that power, who misuse that power, who use that power for their own benefit rather than serving the people around them. That should be, if you ever meet somebody who like wants the power, wants control, wants that position, it's like, you might want to start to look at some of their other motives and ask or wonder to yourself, well, what is it that's driving that person? We talked the other day about the 9 basic motives. Okay. Now, there's a little thing called the, what is it called? It's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect it's a type of a cognitive bias. Okay, it's a psychological phenomenon. Okay, and the Dunning-Kruger effect says that people believe, there are certain types of people who believe that they are smarter and more capable than they really are. They're just overly confident. They think they know everything. They think they got it all figured out. Okay, and more often than not, they don't. But, and here's the interesting point, researchers also include the opposite effect for high achievers and high performers. Now, this is interesting. This says that their tendency is to underestimate their skill and underestimate their knowledge. And sometimes I find that, the people who are the most qualified and the most deserving of success and to start to pursue their goals are sometimes the first ones to underestimate and to downplay the knowledge, the skills, and the experience that they have. Like, just by a show of hands here, does anybody ever experience what they call the imposter syndrome? Some, yeah, the imposter syndrome, yeah. Well, the truth is, it's actually really common. And interestingly enough, the imposter syndrome is really common amongst high achievers and people at the top of their game. Now, I started to look up, get into this, and I started to look it up. And some notable people who have talked and spoken publicly about feeling like an imposter are people that you'd never even imagined, like people like Tom Hanks. Seriously, Tom Hanks, still thinks that he says that he has those feelings where people are going to be like, find him out and discover that he is a fraud. Or people like Tina Fey or Jennifer Lopez, Lady Gaga, David Bowie, Elton John. If you guys ever watched that Elton John movie that's on Netflix, and he talks about how, he's out there performing with the Rolling Stones and he's backstage puking in the garbage can and thinking, oh my God, I can't go out there. Yeah, I'm such a fraud. I'm not this good. It's like, no, man, you're Elton John. Get the fuck out there. Renee Zellweger, Amy Poehler, Daniel Radcliffe. Okay, guys, check this out. Howard Schultz. Now, Howard Schultz is like the founder of Starbucks, like one of the most richest people on the planet. Sheryl Sandberg, if you're not familiar with her, she's the COO of Facebook. Emma Watson, Natalie Portman, Meryl Streep. Meryl Streep has been nominated for 21 Oscars over the years. Okay, she's won 3. And just based on that, she's the most acclaimed actress of all time. All time. And she's out there publicly speaking about how she still suffers from what's called imposter syndrome. That's crazy to me. But here's the point that I'm going to make here is that if you do ever experience imposter syndrome, which it sounds like some of us do, maybe see that rather than as proof positive that you're not good enough, maybe see that as a fact that, hey, maybe, you know what? Maybe the fact that I'm questioning myself just goes to show that I'm probably worthy of this position in the first place. Maybe it's an opportunity for us to reframe that relationship with imposter syndrome. Start to see the fact that you're experiencing something like self-doubt as actually maybe a really good sign. The reason I say that is because, it's one of those things that the more I learn, the more I realize that I know nothing at all. You get around people who think they know everything, or they think they're the experts in their field. That should be a first sign to turn and run the other direction. So if there's any part of you that's feeling a little bit of that imposter syndrome, don't sweat it. You're in good company. Now, we're talking about cosmic habit force. Okay, we're talking about success and leadership. The truth is that the first person that you need to lead is you. And if we're talking about manifesting the life of our dreams or manifesting our goals and creating something in our external world, the first thing that we need to manifest is us. Too oftentimes people just start working harder, trying to chip away at achieving their goals without ever really doing the work to change themselves and to become the person who's capable of achieving that goal. And I don't have to tell you that if that's your effort, that's your attempt, that's your strategy, it's not going to go far. And how do you do that? Well, you identify the qualities, the characteristics, and the traits that you value in that person. You ask yourself, well, who's the man or who's the woman that's capable of achieving that goal? Who's doing that right now? What do they have? How do they live? How do they act? How do they think? How do they make decisions? And then demand that you start to show up that way daily, not occasionally. And how do you do that? By implementing the small, little daily habits that lead to that success. Like I said, if you take care of the small things, the big things take care of itself. One of my favorite lines that I shared with Ryan Bamford and really stuck with him is that, you know, show me a man or a woman who's incapable of doing the little things, and I'll show you a person who's undeserving of the big things. They're all little things. They're all little things. You know, sometimes the things that are easy to do are also the things that are easy not to do. So the challenge, or maybe the task at hand, is to just repeat them over and over and over and over again until it becomes an ingrained habit. You do the little small things so often and so frequently that now you don't even think about it. It's just something that you do. How do you do that? The same way you've learned to do anything. Like, just by a show of hands here, who here has brushed their teeth today? I hope everybody, right? Everybody. Okay. Well, let me ask you, was that something that you had to like write on your to-do list? Did anybody have brush their teeth written on their to-do list? Melissa's going for the mic. Did you put it on your to-do list? You crossed it off your to-do list just to feel accomplished, didn't you?
No, I was just gonna say this morning, my daughter reminded me that I needed to brush my teeth this morning when I went and woke her up.
Funny. That's cute. But you know, chances are that you've been taught through habit and repetition that that's just what we do. We just brush our teeth every day. Ideally, probably a couple of times or a few times a day. And it's just something that you do. And in fact, you'll know that you've established a habit when it's not something that you even have to think about doing anymore. In fact, it's something that you just do so automatically that if you don't do it, it feels like something's missing. You know, like I shared that I'm going into have a little surgical procedure this weekend. And the doctor said I'm not allowed to exercise for a week. Okay, no exercise, no physical exertion, no bike riding, no nothing, can't do anything for a week. And I thought, oh shit, like this, I'm actually legitimately a little bit concerned for my mental and emotional well-being. Like I don't necessarily work out for the muscles. I always say that that's just like a bonus. I work out for mental and emotional hormonal regulation. It does wonders for my mental health. I'm a little bit worried without being able to do that, what's going to happen? And when you start to create a habit, you build those little building blocks and you allow the cosmic habit force just to take over, and it becomes something not just that you do, but it becomes something that you can't not do. That's how you create that upward trajectory. That's how you create that momentum, and you literally create yourself and your life. So the trick is to get those little habits going. In Atomic Habits, James Clear says that you can't optimize a habit until you establish the habit. And how do you establish the habit? Just start super small with the tiniest little building block that you can. 2 minutes or less. Start by flossing one tooth. Start by doing one push-up. Start by doing one affirmation. And over time, you build on it until it becomes so ingrained that the cosmic habit force just takes over and you just do it automatically. It's not just something that you do, but it's something that you can't not do. It's not just something that you do, but it becomes a part of who you are. Whether that's your affirmations, whether that's your gratitudes, whether that's your reach outs, your calling, whether that's your being calm and peaceful, meditating, being present, that's a habit. And I'll tell you, the last point here, and I'll let you guys run, is that we've talked before about the power and the potential to create what's called a paradigm shift. Okay. And a paradigm shift is essentially a shift in identity. It's a shift in your identity. And unless it becomes something that's fixed part of your identity, how you view yourself, and something that you've attached to on an emotional level, your results, whether it's in your bank account, your waistline, your anything else for that matter, will always be temporary. Temporary improvements are just that, temporary. It's got to be something that you internalize and emotionalize. And to create a true paradigm shift is to create an identity shift. And how do you do that? By incorporating habits, starting small, and allowing the cosmic habit force to take over. The same habits that probably prompted most of you guys to put on pants today without thinking about it, to brush your teeth today without thinking about it, to do half of the number of things today that you don't think about, you just do. At first, it takes some conscious effort though. But if you can start to harness the power of the cosmic habit force and get those little habits running, look out, baby. Any questions about any of that before I let you guys run? Cosmic habit force. Just a fancy way of saying habits. It's interesting to me, though, what he's done is described the paradigm and the subconscious mind before a lot of people were using the term paradigm or subconscious mind. Okay, guys. Well, I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. Happy Friday. Enjoy the weekend. And I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Take care, everybody.